Hey everyone, it's Scott Hansen from NFL Red Zone reminding you to watch Sports Ballers, the podcast that gets you caught up on everything Washington sports and beyond.
Good evening and welcome to the latest edition of the Sports Ballers podcast. My name is Eric. I've got hosting duties this week, and I am joined by Corey and Evan as always. We've got a lot to get through today. We've got conference finals in the NBA playoffs about to kick off, or one of which has already started. We just had a couple series wrap up this weekend with some epic Game 7s that we're going to talk about at length. We've also got some baseball news to get through, and a little bit of NCAA with the Supreme Court making their ruling today when it comes to player compensation. But we'll start in the NBA as we have the last few weeks. We'll start in the Eastern Conference with the Nets falling to the Bucks in Game 7 at home in overtime, 115-111. What else do you say about a Game 7 that went to overtime? I mean, it was an awesome game. It was a very interesting roller coaster of a series, given the fact that the Nets jumped out to a 2-0 lead. Then they lose Game 3 on the road in a tight one. Then they lose Kyrie Irving. They look like they're screwed. They somehow win Game 5 at home, and then they lose Game 6, and they lose a heartbreaker in Game 7. And now the Bucks are going to the Eastern Conference Finals. So shout out to them for getting it done. But I think it's pretty obvious that without the injuries, this is a different series, that the Nets probably advance pretty routinely.
Yeah, I mean, you can't tell me that, a fully healthy James Harden and Kyrie Irving on the floor to complement KD doesn't constitute at least a one-game swing in this series.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that had Harden been fully healthy, they probably win Game 7. Had Kyrie Irving stayed healthy in Game 4, who knows?
The series probably doesn't even go 7 at that point.
The game was very close when Irving went down, and we've seen the Bucks have a penchant for falling apart down the stretch of games because they don't have reliable offense to go to, given the fact that Giannis is their best player. And Giannis, as great as he is, has limitations in the half court running an offense. And Mike Budenholzer is just a train wreck of a playoff coach. I don't care that he won this series. If they had lost, I would have come on here today and said, you could have replaced Mike Budenholzer with another competent coach and they would have won the series, because they should have won this series easily. As soon as Harden went down in Game 1, the Bucks should have taken control of the series. They didn't. They needed Kyrie Irving to go down and for James Harden to return not nearly at 100% to have a puncher's chance. And that speaks to poor coaching, in my opinion, because the Bucks, I thought, coming into this series, could go head up with the Nets fully healthy, given what they did in the regular season, given the Nets' limitations on defense. But the Bucks' offense was not very impressive for most of the series, and I think that they kind of got away with one. I mean, I'm happy that they took advantage. Good for them. Happy for them. Going to the Eastern Conference Finals, they'll be favored to beat the Hawks, which we'll get to them in a little bit. And so they'll probably be favored to win the East, but they definitely got away with one. But I got to give full credit to Giannis Antetokounmpo, because people talked all weekend about how Kevin Durant was backpacking this Nets team down the stretch of this series because of all the injuries. But so was Giannis. He really carried his team. It wasn't like it was some team effort by the Bucks that helped them vanquish Kevin Durant by himself. No, Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday did not show up for this series. Chris Middleton had a good Game 6. That was his only good game of the series, and that game was mostly a blowout. He didn't show up in Game 5. They lost a close one. He didn't show up in Game 7 until the very, very end. Had he shown up for all 4 quarters, they'd probably win that game running away. Drew Holiday had one of the worst games I've seen in a Game 7 in a long, long time, and they got away with it because Giannis was great. I mean, if you look at the numbers compared side by side, Kevin Durant and Giannis Antetokounmpo in this series, KD was not any more efficient from the field than Giannis was. He scored a few more points in terms of overall volume, but it wasn't like KD was just single-handedly carrying his offense while Giannis was struggling and deferring to everybody else to help them get on board. Giannis was just as big of a force carrying his offense, especially the last few games. And that's not to knock Kevin Durant. He was brilliant in this series. It's more to prop up Giannis and give him his proper due credit here.
Yeah, I've seen some tweets the last few days and specifically after this series wrapped up that basically were suggesting that we shouldn't be propping Giannis up, that we shouldn't be giving him a bunch of credit for winning this series because they wouldn't have won it if the big three had been intact. And I think that that's a terrible take. Not that they wouldn't have lost if the big three were intact, because they would have. Absolutely, they would have. But both things can be true. You can say Giannis would not have been enough if everybody on the Nets had been healthy, while still saying Giannis carried his team, and if it wasn't for him, they still wouldn't have won this series.
Because the way I look at it is, once KD lost his teammates, his superstar teammates, he didn't have a ton of help. Giannis didn't have any help the entire series.
If the Nets had stayed healthy and won this series, we would be looking at Giannis saying, wow, the only reason that they were even competitive is because of him.
Right, and there were certain times in the series, specifically after Game 5, where Giannis was getting a lot of heat because he didn't play well down the stretch of that Game 5 and they lost it. And that's when a lot of people thought the Bucks were toast, and they rallied and they got it done in Game 6 and 7. But again, if you just look at the numbers in terms of what everybody but Giannis and KD did, the Nets win this series if it's just based on that. So I'm not saying that that means that Giannis necessarily outplayed Kevin Durant, but I would say he went toe-to-toe with him. And given the fact that all we've heard for the last 2 weeks about KD is that he's the best player in the world, according to many people, given the way purely on the strength of how he performed in this series, then you've got to say Giannis is certainly every bit the MVP that he was the last 2 seasons. A lot of people have been calling him a fraud MVP and this, that, and the other. Well, that fraud MVP just went toe-to-toe with an all-time great in an epic series, and he came out on top. That should be a legacy moment for a player like Giannis. And if, and I presume they will, make the NBA Finals, then it's going to go on his resume and it's going to boost him up as one of the great players that we've seen. Yes, he has some limitations. He's still working those out, unlike some other people who have not even bothered to try to learn how to shoot. Giannis is continuing to progress in that manner, and he's going to do whatever he can to maximize his ability to shoot. Even if he's not perfect, he's never going to be at this point, but he's never going to stop trying to improve his game. And given the fact that he's 26 years old and on the cusp of making a finals with a team and a coach that seem like they're absolutely going to do everything they can not to help him get there, he deserves a ton of credit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think we have to be careful to make sure we give Giannis enough credit. It's not his fault that Kyrie Irving and James Harden got hurt, unless it's a Tanya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan situation.
Well, there was a lot of consternation about how Kyrie got hurt, because he got hurt because he came down on Giannis's foot, which is why he rolled his ankle. And so you had some people calling for a suspension of Giannis because of it. And I saw the play and I was like, he was in the lane. Giannis was moving in for a rebound. It was an unfortunate accident. Maybe you could have called a foul.
I'd be pretty darn impressed if somebody could intentionally place their foot right under where somebody's going to land in such a way that it's going to turn and injure their ankle.
Well, plenty of people do it on jump shooters, but jump shooters are right in front of you. Giannis was coming in from the side to try to crash the boards. Kyrie was in the lane attempting a floater, and he came down, unfortunately, on Giannis's foot. But Giannis Antetokounmpo has earned more than enough benefit of the doubt. He's not a dirty player. There's no way in hell he intentionally slid his foot under Kyrie, hoping that he would roll his ankle and be out for the series. That's not something that Giannis would ever do. And unless he develops a track record like Draymond Green or like Bruce Bowen or other people who have a history of dirty tricks, I'm not going to sit there and pretend like something happened that didn't. So we'll move on to the series that ended last night. The Sixers lost to the Hawks in Game 7 at home. And what do you say about the process at this point? It's got to be dead. I mean, I guess we'll start there.
Well, I mean, it certainly can't continue. The process has run its course. You're no longer able to get those high draft picks.
At this point, this is supposed to be this is the product of the process. We've been there for the last couple of years now. And how do you say anything but it's been an abject failure? I mean, the idea of the process was you tank for a certain number of years. In this case, it was 4, where they were just absolutely dreadful on purpose. And the idea was to accumulate draft picks and get high draft picks. And we've got a nice long list here of picks that the Sixers have made since, I guess
this goes all the way back to 2010, but
yeah,
a lot of these, like, you can kind of, they weren't really part of the process.
No, and because the Sixers made the playoffs back in 2012.
Yeah, like Nikola Vucevic, that's not part of the process. Michael Carter-Williams, that's not part of the process.
Yeah, the first process pick was Joel Embiid.
Absolutely.
That was the first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because
so he was the one good pick they had.
Yes, the thing is, they could have ended the process right then and there and said, okay, we've got our guy. And they would be exactly where they are now. They'd have a superstar who is Joel Embiid.
And they'd be a team that can make it to an Eastern Conference semifinal.
Yeah, unless they did something else to bring in another star. But anyway, here's the list post Joel Embiid. Now I'm kind of reading up the list, which will be awkward. And I'll try to talk about this as I go. The same year that they drafted Embiid, they also drafted Elfrid Payton. I believe he plays for the Knicks now. In 2015, they used their top 2 pick on Jahlil Okafor, who I'm pretty sure is out of the league at this point. 2016, they drafted Furkan Korkmaz, who comes off the bench for them now. 2016, they drafted Timothy Luau-Cabarrot, who don't know where he is. 2016, they drafted Ben Simmons with the number 1 overall pick, and, well, we'll get to him in a little bit. Yeah. 2017, they drafted Markelle Fultz with the number 1 overall pick. He currently plays for the Orlando Magic. Not there anymore. 2018, they drafted Landry Shamet. He plays for the Los Angeles Clippers now. And he's, actually, no, Shamet plays for, no, he plays for the Nets now. They traded him to the Clippers, and then the Nets picked him up.
Oh, my goodness.
And then Michael Bridges plays for the Suns. In 2019, they drafted Ty Jerome. I don't know where Ty Jerome is off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure he's in the league, but don't know where he is.
Not with the 76ers,
no.
though.
And 2020, they drafted Tyrese Maxey, who was a rotation guy, pretty good player for them. No knock on Tyrese Maxey. He deserves credit. He had a good rookie year.
So out of all those players, 3 of them still on the team.
Yeah, 3 of them still on the team. One
of them really good, one of them decent, and the other one,
yeah, he's all right.
We'll get to shortly.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you tanked your asses off to acquire one superstar who unfortunately struggles to stay healthy.
And who you drafted almost 7 years ago now.
Yes.
So you've wasted a lot of his career.
Yes. Joel Embiid's 27. Like, he's not young anymore. He's in his prime. Like, this is his peak form. This is when you're supposed to make a move and start trying to win championships. And they're kind of stuck in neutral here a little bit. They draft Ben Simmons. And the thing is, part of the tank job was the fact that Embiid didn't play his first 2 seasons. Like, he had some foot injuries. They probably could have gotten him on the court if they really wanted to, but they didn't really want to. They wanted to continue the tank. Same thing with Ben Simmons, who sat out with a foot injury his entire first year in the NBA. Again, he could have come back, but they said, we'll tank some more. And then they get on the court, and this is sort of where the problem lies, because Joel Embiid's a great player, and I like Joel Embiid a lot. He's a very entertaining personality. But this is the first season that Embiid and people around Embiid felt confident that he put in the proper work to get his body in shape to last the season. I mean, he played well during the regular season. He had an unfortunate bunch of injuries, but they were not related to, in my opinion, bad conditioning. It was just misfortune that he got hurt. And he still played through it, and he played his ass off in this series despite having a torn meniscus. I mean, you can't knock Joel Embiid for how he performed. But at the same time, you got to look at it and say he could have been this a little earlier had he been a little bit more professional. And same thing with Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons comes in the league, can't shoot. He makes the playoffs as a rookie. The Boston Celtics take advantage of the fact that he can't shoot. And then he comes back the next year, and he still can't shoot. And the Raptors take advantage of the fact that he can't shoot. And then he comes back the next year and can't shoot. And the Celtics take advantage of the fact that he can't shoot, although I don't think he actually even played that series. And then this year, the Sixers finally look like a legitimate contender in the Eastern Conference, and their season unravels mostly because Ben Simmons can't shoot. So I look at this and I say there is something to creating a culture of losing where if you're taught as a professional basketball player that it's fine to just be you and not grow your game, then this is kind of what you get. And unfortunately, the Sixers didn't have any veteran leadership in that locker room because they didn't want any. They wanted to lose games, and you bring in veterans. Veterans tend to want to compete and win. And they also get up your ass when you're sitting there struggling to make free throws, and they say, you've got to fix this. They hold you accountable. When Ben Simmons is the second best player on the team at 19 or 20 years old, and the best player on the team is Joel Embiid, who is also a guy who has never had somebody really give him a foot in the ass when he's been loafing, you end up with a situation where you have zero accountability. And you've created now an underachiever in Ben Simmons. And it's not, I can't sit there and blame it all on the process. Ben Simmons has to be accountable for his own actions as well. But you can't tell me that wasn't a factor here.
So I also have to ask you, in addition to all of that, the apparent failed process, Ben Simmons continuing to suck and refusing to shoot. And I mean, you showed me the screenshot of where he had a clear path. He was right by the hoop. He could have easily taken it up. Instead, he passed it off to somebody who, in the screenshot, looked pretty covered. Obviously, the guy is rotating over towards Simmons, but still, like, passing out of an easier shot.
6 feet 10 inches tall, standing under the basket with the ball.
Outside of all of that, and we're all, I think, Doc Rivers fans on this show, if nothing else, him as a person, but of the 10 biggest blown leads in playoff games over just the last 2 seasons, either 6 or 7 of them, I forget how many, it was either 6 or 7 of them, are Doc Rivers between the Clippers last year and the 76ers this year. How much blame should be placed on him as the coach?
I mean, I think he deserves a lot of blame. I think that the lack of adjustments throughout the years have been apparent. Last year, they couldn't solve the Nuggets when they made an adjustment to win that series in the bubble. I mean, the trend is obvious at this point.
I was talking to Rashonda last night about it. She said he's been blowing playoff leads since 2003 with Orlando.
Yeah, the Orlando Magic lost a 3-1 lead. Now, granted, that was a Magic team that had Tracy McGrady and nobody else going up against the Detroit Pistons, who would become, I'm not going to call them a dynasty, but they became a power in the Eastern Conference for a long stretch. They made, what?
That was like Ben Wallace. And
Ben Wallace and Rip Hamilton and Chauncey Billups. They made 2 straight NBA finals. They won a title. They made a ton of Eastern Conference finals. They were always the team to be reckoned with. So you can almost give them a pass on that one. But then you had the one against it was in 2015, the Clippers they were playing the Rockets, and they blew a 3-1 lead in that series. And again, any individual series you can find an excuse, because the Clippers didn't have much depth, and so they were running out that starting 5 that was probably the best in the league with Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, on and on and on. That team was really, really good, but they didn't have the depth, and so you could always say, well, we ran out of gas. Well, okay, but everybody's tired. It's the playoffs. It's the Western Conference semifinals. It's a slog. We get it. It's tough. But you got to win one last game in 3 shots, especially when you've got home court. And they flat out blew it. And then you had last year in the bubble, which was a mess. And then you had this year where they blew a 28-point lead in Game 4 or Game 5.
I think it was Game 5.
And that's at home. I mean, you lose a lead like that at home. You blew Game 4 as well. And then you sit here and you somehow gut out Game 6 on the road. I thought they were toast. I thought for sure they were going to lose that game after they dropped the previous 2. And then
they got to go back home.
And then they don't get it done. I mean, what can you say about that? And you can't sit there and blame it all on Ben Simmons, because I watched the entire game last night. And yeah, Ben Simmons' inability to affect the offense in the half court is a huge problem. But at the same time, there were other issues with the Sixers. They struggled to get back in transition a lot. They did not do a particularly good job of attacking mismatches. They did not seem to understand that every time Kevin Huerter, go Terps, saw Seth Curry on him, he was going to pick him apart. And so that's what he did. They basically were seemingly hoping Kevin Huerter would stop making his shots. Red Velvet don't miss. So that's what happens. You end up making 0 adjustments. I mean, Doc does not seem to inspire confidence anymore. He used to be a guy that people would look at and say, that's a seasoned, veteran, high-quality coach with a championship pedigree because of what he did with the Boston Celtics. But you got to look at him now based off of what he's done the last 12 years. I mean, even that Celtics team in 2010, they blew a 3-2 lead to the Lakers in the finals. Now 3-2 is not 3-1, and they had to win one of two road games in Staples Center. But still, they had some opportunities to win a championship then. They blew a 3-2 lead. They came home against the Miami Heat in Game 6 up 3-2, and they got decimated by LeBron James. Had no answers for him. I mean,
is it time for Doc to hang it up, you think?
No.
And if so, do you think that he'd be good in the booth? Because I think that he would be really good as an analyst.
Doc Rivers can do whatever he wants as, post NBA coaching career. He's still a good enough coach to coach in the NBA. There's no way that Doc Rivers should be forced out, and I don't think that you can cut him loose after one season in Philadelphia.
So it's not so much do we think that he should be forced out, because I'm 100% with you on that. It's more of, do you think that he, if he does continue to coach, can do so successfully? And I'm defining success as, can he make it to an NBA Finals given a talented enough roster?
I think he could, yeah. I mean, I still think this Sixers team could have made the Finals if they had a little better of a team construction. And probably, frankly, if Joel Embiid was healthy, they'd probably get past the Hawks.
So you don't put the bulk of the blame on
No, I do not.
Series.
I think that there were issues with Embiid where he struggled to stay at a high level for the duration of the series, given the fact that he's dealing with a torn meniscus. So I got to imagine every single movement he makes on the court comes with some pain attached to that. So that wears you down quicker. And, of course, we've talked about Ben Simmons and his lack of ability to do anything offensively. I mean, the play that he didn't make on that dunk has been highlighted because it was pathetic. But they still got free throws out of that possession. Matisse Thybulle was fouled on that play. After he passed the ball to Thybulle, Danilo Gallinari rotated down and fouled him before he could dunk it himself, which is why it was such a dumb play, because Simmons was in such a good position. He had Trae Young coming over late to try to stuff him. That's going to end up being an and one. Trae's going to get posterized. He might commit the foul, and then you go to the free throw line and probably miss because you're Ben Simmons. But that's still better than putting somebody else on the line to only split free throws. But that's not why they lost. They lost the game because they couldn't maintain any type of half-court offense. They had two guys they could rely on to hit shots, and that was Embiid and Seth Curry. And as I mentioned, when Seth Curry's on the floor, yeah, he's a great shooter. He's a great floor spacer. But, man, he's easy to take advantage of on the defensive end. And that's what the Hawks did, and they rode Kevin Huerter to victory. Who would have thought?
So we did get a mailbag question this week from Rashonda. And it sounds like two of these you've sort of already answered, because she asked, should the Sixers do one of these three things? One, fire Doc Rivers. You've already said no.
I don't believe so, no.
I don't think that they should do that. 3 was both that and the second thing, and so obviously we're not going with that if we're not firing Doc Rivers. So number 2 is, should they trade Ben Simmons?
Absolutely, but the problem is it's going to be a lot harder now than it was this time 12 months ago or 8 months ago. I mean,
is it though?
It is. It is though. It really is, because
Did we see something new that makes us even less confident in him than we already were before? Because you've been talking on the show basically since we started the show 149 episodes ago that this guy can't shoot.
Can't and won't shoot.
And
Yeah,
won't.
But the problem is it's getting worse, and as his lack of aggression and his lack of ability to shoot the basketball has continued, he's become less and less of a focal point in the offense for good reason. And so you can't really prop him up. And this is the first time in a series, I think, where you can really point to him specifically and say, you are the reason we lost this series. Because I think you can do that. I think if Ben Simmons was a better shooter, or at least a willing shooter, they probably win this series. If he was capable of hitting free throws and they couldn't just get away with playing a hack-a-Ben down the stretch of games, which makes him tentative and not aggressive going to the hoop, then I think that they win this series. But this was put on full display for a team with championship expectations. This isn't like 2 years ago when they lost to the Raptors because Kawhi Leonard bounced the ball off the rim 4 times and somehow fell through the net for a buzzer beater. This is a series that they absolutely had no excuse to lose, and they lost. And it falls on the shoulders of Ben Simmons by and large. And at this point, who the hell wants the guy?
So if there are no takers, do you just cut him loose?
You can't do that. He makes too much money, and he doesn't suck, right? Like, this isn't a bad basketball player. He's just not.
He just can't shoot or play
he cost
offense.
them the series.
Yes, he did, but But he's still not a complete negative. He still provides some defensive value. And so that is not an endorsement of Ben Simmons by any means. But that is suggesting.
We're hearing that Eric is a huge Ben Simmons stan right now.
No, I am absolutely
not. You and Pablo Torre are the only two left.
I am thoroughly out on Ben Simmons as any type of significant player on a playoff championship hunting team. But at the same time, cutting him loose just leaves $35 million worth of salary cap space just stuck on your payroll. So this is sort of the conundrum, though, because even if they are able to find a suitor, they're not going to get much for him. So they're in a situation where they can't win with him, but trading them is going to make them worse because they're not going to get anything good back, which means they're just going to have to maybe punt and get rid of him for cheap, and maybe you can manufacture something else and encourage some good player to come to your team or get some expiring contracts, and maybe you can sweet talk Steph Curry to leave in Golden State, which is not going to happen.
That's happening.
It's definitely not going to happen.
Especially not for Philly.
Hell no. It's not. There's no way that happens. But there has to be some type of plan to replace Ben Simmons with an adequate star to pair with Joel Embiid, because Tobias Harris isn't it. He's a good 3, but he's not cut out to be a 2, in my opinion. And then you need somebody. Frankly, they could have used somebody like Chris Paul, who can shoot, can run an offense. I mean, they're asking Joel Embiid to be their primary scorer, to be the initiator of the offense, and to be their best rim protector. You can't ask anybody to do that. It's no wonder he wore down. I mean,
it's all 5 positions.
Yeah,
basically.
You're basically asking the 3 most important things of basketball is having somebody to run your offense, having somebody that can score, and having somebody that can protect the rim. And you said, okay, this guy's got to do all 3. What? What? No. It's no wonder he didn't make it through the series without getting banged up. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, I think, I mean, they have to get rid of Ben Simmons. Like, it's obviously not going to work out. You know, I don't know exactly what they should do, whether they should just trade him or right now, or, you know, leave him on the side of the road somewhere. Like, it's just not going to work. No. And then, like, we went through the list of all the draft picks they've had. Like, a lot of these guys just aren't any good. You know, you sucked for so long to get all these top picks.
A lot of these names I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd say never at least half of the names on this list I don't know.
Yeah, I've never heard of half of these people. And the only reason Markelle Fultz, we've heard of him, is because we went to the same high school as he did. Right? I mean, you know, we're rooting for him, obviously, but he wasn't good.
No, unfortunately,
and it's a results-oriented business. So, you know, you just didn't get it done, along with all the other people on this list that didn't get it done, except for Joel Embiid. So, you know, that's one of their problems. They drafted a bunch of guys. They got all these picks. They drafted a bunch of guys who weren't any good. That's the first issue. And then the guys who did turn out to be a little bit of something, they couldn't coach them and develop them into a cohesive unit that could win a championship. There's no excuse for Ben Simmons coming into the league not being able to shoot, and then 5 years later still can't shoot the ball. Are you kidding me? We still don't know which hand he's supposed to shoot with. Are you in the pros for 5 years?
I think we can figure out that it's not his left hand, given how that's gone. But
imagine being a Major League Baseball player and being unsure of which side of the plate to bat from.
Yeah.
Well, not that you can bat from both.
Yeah,
just,
you
am
do
I
have
right
that.
or left? I don't know. What?
To figure out which arm you throw the ball with. I mean,
exactly. that would even more so.
I mean, it's and the issue is, again, people have dragged Philadelphia for the crap they pulled with the tanking. It was frankly not good for basketball to have teams just shamelessly tanking. They've taken measures against it by limiting the value of being the worst team in the NBA. Now if you're bottom 3, your odds are just as good of getting the number 1 pick, and there's a pretty good chance your pick's going to fall outside the top 3 even if you're in there. So, like, frankly, because, like, I look at, like, an example would be, like, Golden State traded D'Angelo Russell last year for Andrew Wiggins and the top pick for 2021 from the Minnesota Timberwolves, and it's top 3 protected, meaning that if the pick falls in the top 3, the Timberwolves get to keep it. But the thing is, even if they finish with the worst record in the NBA, it's still a 60% chance it's going to fall outside the top 3, and they're not even going to get the pick. So that's where it is at this point. And you look at the Hawks, who are now going to the conference finals for the first time since 2015. That their last appearance happened after the process started. Like, it literally, they went to the conference finals. They got swept by LeBron and company. They came back the next year and made the playoffs again. And then 2017, they were like a mid-tier playoff team with Paul Millsap, and Dwight Howard was on the team. And the Wizards beat them in the first round, and they said, look, we're trending down. Time to blow it up. And so they traded all their good players. They were terrible for a season. They drafted Trae Young. And then 3 years later, they're in the conference finals before the Sixers are. They beat the Sixers to get there. So this goes back to the point where tanking, frankly, it doesn't work any better than any other plan. The main plan should be get the best players and make them better. And that's what the Hawks have done. They got Trae Young. Trae Young is not as good as Luka Doncic, but he's still pretty damn good. He's going to be a multiple-time All-Star. They've got Kevin Huerter as a mid-first-round pick, and they've turned him into something. He's coming off the bench, or in this series, he's starting and playing impactful minutes as a mid-first-round pick 3 years into his career. They have DeAndre Hunter. They've got Cam Reddish. They've got all kinds of these guys that they picked. Sure, they weren't very good, but they weren't going out of their way to be the worst team in the NBA to stack up the picks. They just said, okay, we'll take whoever's available, and
they've turned it into something.
Frankly, anybody that's drafted in the top 10 to 12, you could probably make into an impactful NBA player if you develop him properly. And the Sixers had this attitude of, we're just going to stack the deck to get the best players. Well, again, you set yourself up for a situation where the only guy on your team that you have that's worth anything is the 19-year-old that has no idea how to be a pro. And this is what you get.
Yeah. So who wins the Bucks-Hawks series?
I think the Bucks win. I just don't think that the Hawks have any means to defend Giannis. I think that Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday will be better in this series. There's a little bit more pressure off of them at this point because they're not going up against the big bad Nets where they feel like they got to score every time down the court. Whereas the Hawks, they've got some injury issues. Cam Reddish hasn't played. DeAndre Hunter is out for the postseason. He's probably their third best player. They've got their own injury issues, which again speaks to how pathetic it was that the Sixers couldn't beat them. Because yes, Embiid was banged up, but he was on the floor and still the best player in the series. Why the hell couldn't the rest of the team rally and get a win in Game 7 or Game 5 or Game 4? But I just think that the Hawks, congratulations to them for getting this far. And Trae Young is the real deal and has proven himself to be an up-and-comer and a guy to watch every postseason because not just because he's great, but also because he plays the role really well of being an NBA star. He has fun on the court, but I think that it's just a matter of the Bucks are going to out-talent the Hawks at this point. So anyway, we'll move to the West now, and I'll recap the Jazz-Clippers series before we get into the current series that just started yesterday. So the Clippers fell down 2-0, and a fun stat, Kawhi Leonard has never lost a series where his team fell behind 2-0 in the series. There you go. So that's fun. But Kawhi Leonard didn't play the last two games of this series. The Clippers tied it up 2-2 after winning both home games. They went back to Utah, no Kawhi Leonard, and just about everybody said, okay, well, that's it for the Clippers. And then Paul George showed up. Playoff P. Decided he was actually going to be Playoff P. And he lit it up to his full credit. He got it done. The rest of the Clippers' other guys showed up. Reggie Jackson stayed hot. Terrence Mann lit it up in Game 6. Just absolutely torched Rudy Gobert, the so-called Defensive Player of the Year. And he was rightfully dragged, similar to Ben Simmons, for being a guy who, despite the fact that he's got a lot of hardware for being a great defender, is absolutely useless in playoff series. Again, got played off the floor, or at least should have been played off the floor. If the Jazz wanted to win the series, they would have taken his ass out of the game. Has no business defending anybody on the perimeter. So when a team goes small, all you have to do is just say, okay, whoever Gobert is guarding, yeah, you're going to score all the points tonight because he can't defend you if you're not right next to the basket. And Gobert can't punish anybody by saying, okay, you've covered me now with a 6'8 forward and I'm 7'2. I'm just going to out-tall you and score on you. He's too clumsy and uncoordinated to actually do that. He stinks offensively. And so he just gets taken advantage of every single playoff series that he plays in. He is not a playoff player. He's just like Ben Simmons. He's the same guy except French and a little taller. Like, that's who he is, and I'm so tired of Rudy Gobert. I'm tired of him talking like he's something special. I'm tired of him giving the NBA COVID and ruining sports for a year. I'm tired of him touching the microphones like a smart ass, just it turns out. I'm tired of him giving Donovan Mitchell COVID and causing a rift with him because Donovan Mitchell is actually worth his salt. I mean, my goodness. Get this guy out of my face. And the Jazz are paying him a ton of money for like the next 4 years. Well, congratulations, because you're in the same exact situation as Philly is with Ben Simmons. You're not going to be able to move that guy for anything worthwhile in exchange. And Donovan Mitchell's going to say, you know what? Why the hell do I want to play in Salt Lake City? He's going to leave. So, way to go, Utah. You set yourself up for failure again. And frankly, I kind of hate your fan base, so I don't care. Anyway, the Clippers, though, they're playing the Suns, and that's a really exciting series. I know that a lot of people think that the Suns are just another stop on the NBA's Siberian map.
I'm rooting for the Suns to win the whole thing at this point.
I probably am too, yeah. I think the Suns are a lot of fun.
Fun fact. Of these 4 teams, they have combined to make exactly one NBA Finals appearance in our entire lifetime.
Yeah, the Suns made it in 1993.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you've got the dorks that get on there and talk about, oh, the ratings are going to be terrible. I don't care about the ratings. I don't give a damn about the NBA's ratings.
It's kind of nice to actually see like teams that aren't always in it.
I don't understand people who care about the NBA's ratings. As far as fans go, as long as they're making enough money to keep the lights on, I don't care. I don't care if nobody wants to watch the Bucks versus the Suns in the finals. My ass is going to be watching. And you know what? It's nice to have guys like Devin Booker and guys like DeAndre Ayton be able to play on the big stage. I mean, this idea that we have to have LeBron or KD or Steph in the finals because those guys are your cash cows, well, those guys are all older now. They're all in their 30s. Kevin Durant's got injury history. Steph's playing on a team that's no longer a contender. And LeBron is ancient. These guys are not going to be around forever.
And that's also one of the biggest knocks on the NBA is that those guys are always in it when you get to the conference finals and even the NBA finals. It's always some combination of those top guys. There's no parity in the NBA. It makes the regular season even less valuable than it already is by having more than half of your league in the playoffs.
Sure, and then you've got people that sit there and whine about the super teams all the time and say, oh, there's no parity, just too many super teams. And then when the super teams get bounced, you start whining about the fact that there's going to be no ratings. I'm like, who cares? Do you like basketball? Okay, then tune in and watch the basketball and enjoy it. Devin Booker's an exciting player. Chris Paul he's an elder statesman in the NBA. He's one of the greatest point guards of all time. He's never made an NBA Finals. He and Steve Nash are probably the greatest players that never made an NBA Finals.
At least now, he still has a chance.
Yeah, Chris Paul very much has a chance to do so this year. I mean, I just don't get this idea that we have to care about the NBA in Piscataway, New Jersey, or wherever the hell it is, or Piscataway might be where Rutgers is. I don't care. It's all wasteland. And I'm just like, why do I give a damn what Adam Silver or the owners or the sponsors think? I'm just trying to watch good basketball, and that's what I'm going to do.
I'm not even sure if New Jersey exists outside of the rest stops along the turnpike.
We probably shouldn't. Anyway, this series game 1 was pretty wild. Like, I didn't really get a chance to watch the whole thing. I was at a restaurant after I went to the Bay Sox game on Sunday, and it was halftime when I came in, and every time I looked up, somebody was making a shot on both sides. It was just every time the ball was going in the basket, people just couldn't miss, and I'm like, this is going to be a wild series. I don't know if Kawhi Leonard's going to be able to play. He's been diagnosed with an ACL injury, which is not a diagnosis in my opinion. Like, a diagnosis is it a sprain? Is it a tear? Is it tendonitis? What is it? Like, I know he's got an injury. He's not playing. Duh. Tell me why he's not playing. But anyway, ACL injuries of any type, even if it's not a tear, usually require surgery of some type. And so, frankly, they're being cagey probably because they don't want people to freak out. But I don't think he's going to play in this series. Maybe if they got to the finals, he could be back for that one. But even then, I'd be surprised. And it probably would be to the detriment of his long-term health. It's not worth taking the risk. But, which is unfortunate because I think the Clippers, if they had Kawhi, I think they would be favored to win the title at this point, given the fact that until he got hurt, he had...
Froze on their end. I don't understand.
Well, Evan's saying stuff.
Yeah, we froze, so I'll quit out of Skype. You keep talking.
Okay, so, I think the Clippers could have won the championship. I think they still can. It really depends because Ty Lue has done such a good job with this team. And I think it's time we start giving Ty Lue his credit because a lot of people dismissed him as a coach because they were like, oh, well, he won a championship with LeBron James. And so I'm like, okay, but a lot of coaches haven't won a championship with LeBron James. So what are you talking about? David Blatt didn't win a championship with LeBron James. Mike Brown didn't win a championship with LeBron James. And Mike Brown was a big part of the coaching staff for the Golden State Warriors. He coached the Warriors for the most of the playoffs in 2017 when Steve Kerr was out with his spinal issues. So he's got a reputation as a high-quality coach in the league. He couldn't win with LeBron. Eric Spoelstra won twice with LeBron, and we consider Eric Spoelstra a really good coach. And he hasn't won jack squat since LeBron left. So I don't understand why Ty Lue didn't get his credit. He definitely deserves his credit now because when you constantly come back from down 2-0 in a series, you got to look at the coach and say, what are you doing to make adjustments to make this work? Because the Clippers have so many players that all of them do something well. Most of them do something poorly as well. So Ty Lue has to figure out how to piece it together series by series. Patrick Beverley was a starter for the Clippers this year. He didn't play after Game 1 against the Mavericks because he could not guard Luka Doncic. But then Patrick Beverley was playing against the Jazz because it was a better matchup for him. Ty Lue figured that out. Ty Lue figured out that Terrence Mann was a better matchup against the Jazz because he's a solid wing and the Jazz couldn't defend him. This is what Ty Lue's done his entire career, and he hasn't really gotten any credit for it, which is a shame. I think that if he makes a run to the finals here, people are going to start saying, well, damn, Ty Lue's a good hire. And all this crap that people said about, oh, well, firing Doc Rivers to hire Ty Lue, that was dumb. I never thought it was dumb to hire Ty Lue. I thought firing Doc Rivers seemed a little bit unfair, but hiring Ty Lue I thought was a great idea once they got rid of him. I was like, Ty Lue's a good coach. Yeah. So that's all I've got for this week in the NBA. We'll talk about we'll probably be in the middle of the series unless there's some sweeps next week when we talk NBA.
We do have to discuss your new name as the head coach Grim Reaper.
Oh, yeah. So I was responsible for the death of 2 coaches this week.
Not the death.
Well, not the death.
The
but...
career death of them, or at least
their current career death.
Yeah, well, we'll see. So I predicted that Stan Van Gundy would win Coach of the Year this year in the NBA. I figured that he would get the New Orleans Pelicans back to the playoffs with a healthy Zion Williamson and with Brandon Ingram coming off his first All-Star game. And that didn't happen. The Pelicans missed the playoffs, and I guess Stan Van pissed enough people off, and he got his ass fired after a year. So basically Freddie Kitchens 2.0, except I don't feel as dumb about this because Stan Van Gundy was an esteemed coach in the NBA. He had made an NBA Finals. He was a well-regarded NBA head coach. He was not Freddie Kitchens, who had only coached running backs and clearly had no idea what the hell he was doing. But
I think Freddie was the tight ends coach.
I mean,
to be fair.
It doesn't really matter, though, because the bottom line is if Eric picks you to be the coach of the year in your sport,
you're gone.
You're toast.
Good luck to you. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and then
you should rent and not buy.
And then sarcastically, after Stan Van got fired or got cut loose or however you want to refer to it, whatever polite nomenclature they used, he was dismissed. I sarcastically said Scott Brooks for Coach of the Year next year,
and within like an hour and a half,
an hour.
Yeah.
Scott Brooks was fired.
Scott Brooks was not. His contract was not renewed. He's not coming back to the Wizards. And this is after many months of, or at least a couple of weeks of people saying Scott Brooks is going to return to the Wizards, and I was not happy about that because Scott Brooks is not a very good coach. I complained about it on Twitter. I believe I just responded with whatever when I saw it. I believe Evan liked it. I was not thrilled by that news, and so I was like, hey, Scott Brooks, Coach of the Year, and then he gone.
Yeah, so apparently also, if Eric picks you to be Coach of the Year in your sport in jest, good luck, and you should rent, not buy.
And it's nice that my power works for coaches that have been around for a while. At first I was worried it was just 1 year guys. Like Freddie Kitchens was hired and then fired after a year, and Stan Van Gundy was hired and fired. Scott Brooks has been there a while, and I still managed to get him. So, Coach Turgeon, you're next, buddy. I'm coming for your ass.
Is that 2022 Big Ten Coach of the Year, Mark Turgeon?
That's right. Mark it down.
All righty.
So, anyway, now we are actually done with the NBA. We'll have some more coverage of the Western and Eastern Conference Finals next week, and we'll actually move to the NCAA and the news from the high court in the land. So, the Supreme Court today sided with the former college players in their dispute with the NCAA over player compensation. The decision was a 9-0 sweep in the conservative Supreme Court of the United States. Even Clarence Thomas, even Samuel Alito, even Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, even Amy Coney Barrett,
In fact, I think
even
Brett
John
Kavanaugh
Roberts.
wrote the decision.
Yeah, Kavanaugh wrote the decision. He wrote there is no dissenting opinion. There's one opinion this time because they all agreed. So we'll read off some stuff from an article on ESPN referring to the ruling and get a better understanding of what it actually means, and then we'll get into a little bit of discussion among the three of us. So from this article, it says, as a result of the ruling, the NCAA itself cannot bar schools from sweetening their offers to Division I basketball and football players with additional education-related benefits. But individual athletic conferences can still set limits if they choose. A lawyer for the former athletes said before the ruling that he believed that if his clients won, quote, very many schools would ultimately offer additional benefits. The NCAA had argued that a ruling for the athletes could lead to a blurring of the line between college and professional sports, with colleges trying to lure talented athletes by offering over-the-top education benefits worth tens of thousands of dollars. Even without the court's ruling, however, changes seemed on the way for how college athletes are compensated. The NCAA is trying to amend its rules to allow athletes to profit from their names, images, and likenesses. That would allow athletes to earn money for things like sponsorship deals, online endorsement, and personal appearances at public events. For some athletes, those amounts could dwarf any education-related benefits. So, at this point, I think this is a big win. Anybody that listens to our show knows we're pretty much pro player at this point. And for all you clowns out there that say, well, they get enough benefit with their education room board, well, the damn Supreme Court that hates everything labor and player management and stuff like that, they always side with management given it's a 6-3 advantage. They said in a 9-0 decision, you're full of it. So find a new slant. Yours is dead. It doesn't work anymore. Bye-bye. See you later.
Very good Shrek.
Yes.
I enjoyed that. I mean, we've talked about this for a long time, and this is not a, ultimate win. I think there's still some work to be done on this front because, as the Supreme Court decided, while the NCAA as an institution cannot bar schools from giving additional education-related benefits to basketball and football players in Division I, the conferences can still set limits, right? So whether they will or not remains to be seen, and at the very least, you can figure that where some conferences might, other conferences won't. And so this is still a win because
the conferences are competing against each other.
Exactly. It's no longer, all the conferences are abiding by the rule of one all-encompassing governing organization. The conferences are now going to have to say, okay, well, if the Big Ten is going to allow schools to offer additional benefits, well, as the SEC,
got to step up too.
Yeah, we don't want all of the players who would go to Alabama and Auburn and Florida and wherever else to now decide to go to Ohio State and Michigan State and God forbid Rutgers and Maryland over our schools because, hey, they can actually offer additional benefits. We can't have that. So eventually, most of these conferences, if not all of them, will get on board and will, be willing to offer these additional education-related benefits. Now, I do also want to see this eventually expand beyond just education-related. These players need to be allowed to benefit financially from their own likenesses and things of that nature. But this is a big step forward toward that, especially given that this was a 9-0 decision in a conservative Supreme Court.
Yeah, it shuts down everything that pro NCAA people and the NCAA themselves have said. And I do enjoy this quote from Kavanaugh's opinion that we have here. The NCAA's business model will be flatly illegal in almost any other industry in America. All of the restaurants in the region cannot come together to cut cooks' wages on the theory that customers prefer to eat food from low-paid cooks. Which, yes, I don't give a damn. You know, even if some people do believe that, which I'm sure plenty of people do, that college basketball or college football is better because the players aren't paid, that argument never held any water to me. And it's still not an excuse to not compensate them. Like this idea that, because the people want them to be oppressed and exploited, therefore we should do it. What kind of logic is that? That doesn't make any sense at all. And to what you just said, Corey, about how other conferences would want to get in on encouraging to be a little more liberal with what they offer players, that just goes to show that the entire thing was such a farce in the first place. It's the fact that immediately people would be willing to say, hey, let's go for this. Let's up the ante. Let's give the players more. That just shows that it was artificially being suppressed. The argument was always, well, the players aren't actually worth it. It's about the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back. It's about the traditions and the schools and the pageantry. No. It's about the damn players. You think Alabama would make as much money as they do if they didn't win championships because they've got all the NFL players on their team? Hell no. They'd be irrelevant if they didn't have those guys. You wouldn't see people going nuts, roll Tide everywhere. They would probably say it quietly in their homes instead of going out and buying merch and watching on TV and sitting in Bryant-Denny every Saturday.
100%.
Well, in Alabama, roll tide is a greeting. Like that's just what you say to people.
But why is that? It's because of Alabama.
Yeah, it's because of the tradition of winning, not just the tradition of having a football team. Maryland has a tradition of having a football team, and nobody cares about them because they don't win any games.
I barely hear people say Fear the Turtle anymore, much less what was it that they tried to change it to a while back? Is like
Unstoppable Starts Here.
I think there was something even before that.
Well, Unstoppable Starts Here was cheap.
That sounds like
there was something like when we were on campus. Sean Kennedy actually just jumped on the chat here, and not our chat, but on the show, and said, "Won't anyone think of the poor NCAA administrators? They will only be able to afford 100-foot yachts this year."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Boo-hoo.
And that's also the thing that pissed me off a little bit is how amateurism was supposedly the draw of college athletics, but I don't see any amateur coaches out there. I don't see any coaches out there not collecting a paycheck. I don't see Dabo Swinney working for free.
Yeah, he's got to give back his $93 million.
It's well, but he's not getting an education. Okay, fine. Put him through the same thing. Here you go. You got 4 years of education. And if you're done and we want to rehire you, you got 4 more years of education. Get a new degree. Get a master's degree. Do something else. But that's all we offer. We can't afford to actually give you
Dr. Dabo Swinney.
Yeah,
imagine that.
No legal tender here. We just can offer you an overpriced education that you're never going to use because we're not going to put you in real classes because we want you to suit up for football and focus on that 24/7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
I look forward to the day
it really
I never have to hear
underscores
Dabo Swinney's name again.
Unfortunately, you're going to be waiting a while. He's not exactly an old man.
No, he's not.
Yeah,
and he's a pretty successful man, too, so I don't see him.
They're going to build a statue of Dabo Swinney.
Sure they will.
Like, why wouldn't they? I mean, it really underscores how much of a farce, amateur student-athlete college sports is. Like, if you just look a little deeper, it's absolute nonsense. And it's not like... And it's like the system is sort of stacked against the athletes themselves. Like in football, for example, the NFL, you can't get drafted in the NFL until you've been out of high school for 3 years. So that means you have to go to college for 3 years or just sit somewhere for 3 years and not play at all. So, and then also the schools make so much money. And you mean to tell me that they're all there to see Nick Saban, right? Like, What are you talking about here? We came to watch the football players, not the coaches. So, NCAA, y'all need to pay up. I don't see any reason why the schools can't reach into their bottomless pits of money and just cut the players a little check.
I also saw something interesting about not only does this open the door for better education-related benefits, but also the possibility of post-college paid internships for these guys after they're done playing and after they're done with school. I still obviously would prefer the players to be compensated for the actual work that they do, but that's still something valuable in my opinion, giving the players an opportunity to expand their job prospects, because that's really the whole point. The whole reason we prop up education as being such a valuable asset and why they don't actually need to earn a real paycheck playing college sports is because the education puts you in such a good position to earn a living later on in life. Okay, well then continue that. Keep building them up. Give them money at this point because they are actually working beyond school at this point.
Oh, yeah.
They're no longer a scholarship athlete. They are now an employee, and put them in position to build a career. But this idea that, oh, well, we educated you for 4 years, sometimes in a half-assed manner because we didn't really care, and then we just throw you out there and say, hey, good luck, buddy. No money in your pocket and no real idea of how the hell to do anything, how to do what you need to do to actually be able to function with a career. No, actually provide something of value to them before you send them out the door. And I think that's a good idea. I think it's always been a good idea. And I know the University of Maryland a few years ago decided that they were going to basically offer their athletes, even the ones that leave early for the pros or decide to go to Europe to play basketball, basically they're offered free tuition and free, like a lifetime scholarship to finish their degree whenever they so choose. I think that stuff like that needs to be encouraged because if you're going to sit there,
required.
Yeah, it needs to be. If your point is we are an educational institution and we want to provide opportunities for young men and women to learn, then act like that. Don't just make it about let's earn as much money off their backs before they run out of eligibility and then we don't care anymore. Because then I'm just going to look at you the way I do right now, and I'm going to think you're a clown.
There you go.
So before we move on to baseball, which is probably going to be, basketball is sort of our main topic for today, but baseball has a little bit of meat to it. We'll be talking about the Orioles and the Yankees as usual, along with some other stuff. We got a couple of NFL headlines in the offseason here. Nothing too earth-shattering, but we'll start with my boy Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara has joined NASCAR as the organization's first growth and engagement advisor. Now, I remember last offseason, Kamara got very active tweeting about NASCAR races and stuff like that.
Well, he went to see Bubba Wallace race after everything was going on with him during that NASCAR season, and he became a pretty big NASCAR fan out of that.
Yep. And so he's continued to follow the sport and talk about the sport a lot on social media, and seems like he really knows the sport pretty well now, given the fact that he's become a legit fan over the last year or so. And so he's now, we know NASCAR's got problems with drawing eyeballs. I remember when they were the so-called fastest growing sport in the world because they were starting from zero and growing into something. So infinite growth is always going to be better than that. But then reality struck and they started bleeding viewership because, well, NASCAR's NASCAR. It's stock car racing. It's not going to ever be the biggest sport in the United States.
It's
or in
not
the world.
rocket science. Like, nothing against Alvin Kamara because he's a very intelligent
It is
person.
a little bit of rocket science.
But to say, now he knows a whole lot about it. I know quite a bit about how NASCAR works, and I've watched. I had one season where I watched the first 5 races of the season. That was kind of the extent of my NASCAR.
It's stock car racing. It's not.
To borrow a Jeff Dunham joke, it's a sport that's easy to follow when you're hammered.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the whole point of it.
Yeah,
they're making a left turn. They're making another left turn.
Yes, the point though
Wonder
is
what's going to happen next.
The point though is that Kamara is into the sport, and Kamara is a high profile athlete, and he is a high profile black athlete, and we know that NASCAR is predominantly white and predominantly Southern, which, let's be honest, breeds some problems at times with fan behavior and certain cultural norms within the sport. And I think that having Alvin Kamara involved with the sport could be something positive. Now, I'm sure you're going to see people hating on him.
Oh, sure.
And probably in ways that we would find very problematic. But if he's comfortable with it and he's excited about the opportunity to do it, I think he should go for it. I'm glad that he's invested the time into being something, beyond just being a football player, because it's always cool to see athletes kind of get involved in new things. It really kind of lets them show their personality a little bit more.
Well, the other thing is that any athlete or any fan who tweets and there's backlash to this move to bring Alvin Kamara in and have him involved, that's only going to prove the stereotype, prove the point that it's important to branch out and change NASCAR's image and bring some people in like Alvin Kamara who can have some effect on changing the demographics of the athletes and of the fans from the inside. And if you lose some racist fans along the way, good riddance.
Yeah,
I think this is a tremendous addition. I mean, it can't hurt anything really, aside from losing the racist fans. They won't be missed, frankly. I think this is sort of like what Eric said, having a black athlete with a platform to market your sport. I think that's great to have. And, if you want to keep growing as a sport and as an industry, you got to get yourself out there. It'd be nice if Major League Baseball would do something like this.
I also thoroughly enjoyed Alvin Kamara's tweet at Sean Payton after he took this position.
Well, because there was a whole lot of jokes last offseason that Kamara was going to quit football and just become a dedicated NASCAR guy or something like that, and I was like, don't do that, please. I was like, please.
Now I'm
don't.
the one who's saying please don't do that because I got him on my fantasy team.
Yeah, I was saying that because he plays on my actual team.
Right.
So,
fantasy actual team,
Yeah. Yeah, your fantasy team and reality team, obviously,
fantasy team is
carry
way
the
more
same
important.
weight.
Yeah, but he'll probably not be on the fantasy team as long as he is on the actual Saints. So
Probably not.
So anyway, we'll move on to other players getting involved. This time, Eli Manning is coming back to the NFL, baby. Not as a player, because he can't do that anymore, as we kind of saw towards the end there.
I'll be fair, he's coming back to the Giants, where he might still be the best option at quarterback.
I'm all for Daniel Jones hate, because I feel like people have forgotten that he's not good, or at least they've deluded themselves into thinking
How
that
do people
he is.
forget that he's not good?
People are talking about the Giants' offense this year like they're going to be amazing, and I'm baffled by that.
Where are people getting that from?
Most Giants fans that I know and talk to on a regular basis have forgotten or just never realized that Daniel Jones is not good.
Just happened?
They're not the most intelligent fan base, Evan.
Well, every fan base has their delusions. They're convinced that Daniel Jones' fumbling problem was just a product of everybody else, except for the guy that is holding on to the football not for very long. So anyway, Eli is rejoining the Giants organization. His roles will be he'll be a business operations and fan engagement manager, I guess. So I guess he's going to be working, to do promotions and stuff like that. Like, I don't know if the Giants have anything like a fan fest or something. I'm sure he'd be a hit there.
Sure they do.
Eli is very personable and engaging, and obviously he had a great career with the Giants, and he'll also be inducted into the Ring of Honor on September 26th when the Giants host the Falcons at MetLife Stadium. So good for Eli. I mean, we've talked about Eli at length on this podcast because Eli is a prominent player in the NFL during most of our lives. So it's kind of good to see him still being involved in the NFL because, like I said, he's such a likable guy. And, I've never had anything personal against Eli Manning. I've always just not liked him because he was a Giant for the most part.
And because he wasn't that as good as he was propped up to be.
Yeah, sure. And he's a very controversial player. There's nothing controversial about Eli Manning, the person. Like, he is one of the
nicest guys
statesmen of the NFL. So it's good to see him stay involved with the Giants organization.
If anything, there's less controversy surrounding him than there is Peyton Manning after everything that came out about him at Tennessee. There's really one story,
Yeah,
but
that
still
that
not,
story
not a
is
good look.
this story is also pretty old, though. It's just been recycled now and then. And not to say that Peyton Manning's transgressions there allegedly were not inappropriate, of course, but Peyton Manning and Eli Manning, they're still part of the first family of the NFL, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like with Archie and with them two, and then soon to be Arch Manning, who is apparently filthy. He's going to be coming up and slinging footballs in the NFL, hopefully sometime
I'm looking forward to that.
in the next 5 years or so.
So and Cooper Manning's on TV regularly. I think he works for Fox.
Yes, he does.
ESPN or
he was
somebody.
wearing a jacket at Super Bowl 51 during media day, or I think they call it opening night now, which is lame. But he was wearing a jacket that the patterns were all just like $100 bills. It was very strange. And he was interviewing just random people that were there. Like I think he talked to Marshawn Lynch because, of course, Marshawn Lynch was there. Because Marshawn shows up everywhere except for the podium during his media sessions, which, again, shout out to Marshawn for being a rebel. We love Marshawn.
And supposedly Amazon is talking to Peyton Manning about having him on Thursday Night Football broadcasts.
I mean,
They'd make Thursday Night Football infinitely more watchable, even if it's crummy teams every week.
I'm starting. I mean, as much as I would love to have Peyton Manning on TV, I'm starting to wonder. They're going to start fitting a lot of quarterbacks in here because we got Tony Romo already. Drew Brees is joining NBC. You know, it's.
I mean, to be fair, the quarterback position that's the captain of the team most of the time. It's the guy who sees the whole field. Yeah. I mean, if
that's the glamour position
outside, and it's not to say that there are no running backs, wide receivers, other players who can be successful in the booth. We've seen Chris Collinsworth grow very much through his career. I couldn't stand him back when he was on Fox. He was not good. He was not good in the studio, but somewhere on the line during the course of his time with NBC on Sunday Night Football, he has gotten better and better to the point where the past 7, 8, 9 years of watching him, I thoroughly enjoy him on the call. But if there's a position that you can look at and say, as long as they've got a little bit of pizzazz to them, a little bit of pep and personality to them, they're going to be good in the booth. You're either going to look at the quarterback or the middle linebacker positions.
Sure. And I'm not saying this to suggest that, another quarterback. I'm saying it more because I don't think Peyton Manning should ever be relegated to a B team because he's Peyton Manning.
Well, if you're
running out of A-team slots.
If you're on Thursday Night Football, then that would be
but on Amazon.
But it is still an A team. It's probably the last A team that's remaining.
I
mean, to him.
Yeah.
I want
what
PFM calling a Super Bowl
on Thursday against the Thursday night game that we wouldn't see Peyton Manning.
I mean, I would also like to see Peyton Manning.
I want him calling a Super Bowl at some point. If he's doing Amazon, then it means he's not quite there yet, which would make me sad. But if he's on TV at all, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. To borrow a quote from Tony Kornheiser, once again, it's a television show. Who's the star of the show? The quarterback is the star of the show.
Yes,
He's
indeed.
been the star since he was, in playing pee-wee football as the quarterback, high school, college, in the NFL, he's the star. Yeah. So when he retires and he's still the star, put him on TV as the star. Like that's what it is. And that's all it is. If somebody else is they had Ray Lewis on Sunday NFL Countdown for a few years. He wasn't very good at that. But it's if you're the star, then you get the eyeballs.
Yes, indeed. So we'll move on to Major League Baseball. We'll start with the Baltimore Orioles as they've continued to stink it up. They've only won once in their last 6 games since our last show. And Evan, of course, included his favorite quote in the show notes. If asked about his team's execution, manager Brandon Hyde might say he's in favor of it, which, probably the case. The Orioles had just an awful botched rundown against the Indians. It was a base hit from, I think, Jose Ramirez.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Jose Ramirez hits an opposite field base hit for, driving in a run or two, or I think it might have been, it was 2 runs he drove in. Okay, fine. Jose Ramirez is a good hitter. The Orioles aren't very good. Fine. It's when you can't do the basic stuff that little league teams can do that just really, really chaps your ass as a fan. When you sit there and you watch them blow a run down and then let the guy get all the way to third when he was hung up between first and second is just
Then he came
unreal.
around to score as well.
That does not surprise me at all. So the Orioles continue to be struggle city, and then we had
Stevie Wilkerson dropped a can of corn pop-up, just clanked it off his glove.
and I saw DJ Stewart had another belly flop in the outfield and
Yes, he
fell on
tripped
his
over
face.
some air and, fell flat on his face and then got up and the ball landed right in front of him softly. I think all three of these happened in the same inning, like back to back to back. It was, just a disaster. They can't do anything right.
Nope.
Just the basic stuff. Catch the ball. Look at you, Pedro Severino, for example,
God,
as the catcher. Just catch the ball, please.
So the Orioles had a 3-run lead against the Blue Jays, as I smartly, and I mean that with all the sarcasm, picked up the Blue Jays starting pitcher, assuming he would shut down the Orioles and give me a decent start to finish off Corey in our fantasy game. And he promptly gave up all the home runs and then got pissed and started throwing at hitters and got himself ejected and ended up being worth -1 points. And so I kind of had to sweat for part of Sunday.
You still won pretty handily.
I did, but there was a time period where you pulled ahead on Saturday, like around 3 o'clock, and I was like, just not happy, just sitting at Baysox Stadium being disappointed. But eventually my team rallied and I managed to get the W.
Cedric
and
Mullins just went ham this week.
Love Cedric Mullins. But
That's
anyway,
because he was hitting bombs off of this pitcher whose name we can't remember.
Manoa or something like that. I benched Manea for Manoa or something like that.
Yeah.
And Manea actually pitched very well against the Yankees, and of course I'm just sitting there being pissed, thinking, oh boy, I had a chance to beat Corey, and I'm going to blow it. But, once again,
one of the home runs he gave up was a bomb to DJ Stewart, the aforementioned belly flopper. He hit it almost to Boog's barbecue. Like
Yikes.
that's
far.
Adam Dunn, Jim Thome, Ken Griffey Jr. home run territory. You hit it way out there. That's how far that ball went.
Yeah, so the Orioles eventually blew that game, which allowed my lame-ass pitcher, who is no longer on my roster, off the hook for the loss at the very least. But then, of course, the Orioles lose the game, which always disappointing if you're an Orioles fan, but you kind of come to expect it at this point. So we've got 3 highlighted names here. We've got Cedric Mullins. I guess, Evan, do you want to talk about Cedric Mullins being awesome some more?
I mean, these are the 3 good players who don't suck right now. That's it. That's the list.
Ryan Mountcastle had 3 home runs in that aforementioned Blue Jays game. The Orioles hit 6 home runs and lost, man.
How does that happen?
Yeah.
And Trey Mancini's he's been good this year.
Yeah, he's been good. I think that Mullins should definitely be an all-star.
But you could actually make an argument for the first time in a while that the Orioles could have more than one all-star.
Yeah, I think Mancini would be a worthy selection as well. And of course, John Means being hurt right now probably hurts his chances depending on when he can come back. But given the start he's had, he should be offered consideration as well. So, the Orioles have 4 good players, and that's it. So
out of 26.
Yeah, so we're hoping that more will be on the way soon, or at some point, maybe not soon, but within the next couple of years, including shortstop Gunnar Henderson, who was promoted from low A Delmarva to high A Aberdeen. So that's nice. And
he'd been raking all season, just incredible.
Absolutely.
Just hitting Oppo tacos all the time, like every single night, just doing something incredible. So it's probably past time for him to be promoted, but I think he turns 19 next week. And there was no minor league season last year. He was drafted in 2019, so it makes sense to just take it slow, not to rush him.
Yeah, on some unfortunate news, Heston Kjerstad is dealing with a setback from his recovery from myocarditis. Did he have COVID? Is that why?
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
this is okay. Michael Elias says the issue is, quote, a matter of time before it is resolved, hoping for the best, obviously. And yeah, it's anytime you hear your young draft pick is dealing with heart problems, that's always alarm bells go off.
Yeah.
Myocarditis is treatable with antibiotics and things like that. So hopefully this does get resolved, but the priority is obviously Heston's health. So we need him to do whatever he can to take care of himself as a man before he can worry about playing baseball. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially given that this seems to be stemming from COVID, which we've seen that you can have some long-term organ damage.
Sure. Like Jason Tatum said he still uses an inhaler, and he caught COVID last summer or something like that.
Yeah, so the major complications like this seem to be somewhat rare among healthy people, such as professional
athletes.
But you have to figure when it does strike a professional athlete, it was probably a really severe case of COVID. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, you definitely need to make sure that you're focusing on your health.
Absolutely.
Long before you focus on the sports right now.
Yep. So on a lighter note, at Oriole Park, we had a major upset in the hot dog race. Relish earned their first victory of the year in game 69, or no, not game 69, but like a home game, probably game 35, I think.
Yeah, 35. If it was 17-17 for ketchup and mustard.
So yeah, I don't know how many games the Orioles have actually played, but this is their 35th home game, and it was 17-17-0. Relish had not picked up a win yet. He was the Teddy Roosevelt of hot dog condiments, apparently.
But animated hot dogs,
yes.
right? This race occurs
these guys don't
only
even
on the
run
screen.
on the field.
No,
these are not men in costumes.
No, these are which means that the outcomes are entirely predetermined. Now, not to say that the ones at Nats Park aren't, because you usually have something stupid like somebody jump out and tackle
the
Teddy
Easter
when
Bunny
he was
jumps out.
They're predetermined. For all we know, they could have some sort of like random
little
generator
competition,
that determines it.
Sure, but so Relish squeaked out a victory. He kind of slid in late to pick up a W, and then some crazy guy had 2 big buckets of Relish poured on him. It looked like he was being slimed on Nickelodeon. It was great.
It's like exactly somebody just had Relish prepared. They're like, I'm just going to bring Relish to every game until they finally win one.
He had a Relish shirt on, like a green Relish
This
shirt.
sounds very pre-planned.
Bird logo.
Yeah, but there are a lot of people that go to the ballpark and they wear their favorite condiment jersey or shirt or whatever.
Yeah, the Orioles gave those away a couple years ago.
Just makes it even more lame. I'm sorry.
Makes it lame. Well, we don't
this
have.
is kind of dumb.
This
but
is
now
dumb.
It makes
This is
it,
really
now
dumb.
It makes it lame.
This is really dumb.
From a Yankees fan, you don't have a mascot or anything. The Yankees are no fun. They're boring and ugly. Forgive other teams for having fun.
Wow.
I thought this was supposed to be fun.
I'm sorry, Muhammad Ali out here just calling everybody ugly.
Well, yeah. That's.
Yeah. I mean, you defend the Yankees pillowcase uniforms. Oh, goodness gracious. Those are an eyesore.
With Garrett Cole's son sitting in the crowd with a Cole jersey on, even though Garrett Cole doesn't wear a jersey.
Yeah, I saw
Cole
that
on
too.
it.
I saw a tweet that was like, I don't care how young he is. Get the Cole last name off the back of the jersey.
Come on, man. Be authentic. So, just before we get to Corey's Yankees, I guess I'll just talk about what I did on Sunday. So I took my dad to Bay Sox Stadium for Prince George's Stadium, as I should call it, for a Bay Sox game because Grayson Rodriguez is making his second start at Double-A.
Also because it was Father's Day.
Yeah, it all coincided quite well. We did it for Father's Day, but the reason why it was exciting to go was because Grayson Gas Can Rodriguez was on the bump, and we don't mean gas can the way Evan usually uses it, which is usually a bad way. So
that's just for the Orioles bullpen.
Yes, specifically Michael Givens. So my whole family went. So it was my parents, my brother, me, and I. We all went to the game. Grayson pitched pretty well. He pitched 5 innings, gave up 2 runs. Both runs were home runs, one of which was in the Parkers, so I can't really even fault him for that. It was just a misplay in the outfield with 2 outs and took a funny bounce and got away from the center fielder, and the guy came all the way around on a bang-bang play at the plate. But then the second home run was just absolutely tattooed. But, 5 innings, 2 runs. He was definitely living up to the hype. He was throwing gas. He had this nasty frisbee-looking slider that was just scaring the hell out of the batters, especially the right-handed hitters, because that thing looked like it was coming in ready to hit you, and then it would just drop over the plate. And I was like, when dude's throwing 100 miles an hour, and then he throws a slider that starts off at your thigh, you're probably inclined to get the hell out of the way of that until you realize, oh, crap, it's diving over the plate for a strike. So I was very impressed with him. He
threw the ball through Adley's glove.
He blew a hole in Adley Rutschman's glove. I remember at the moment that it happened, I was like, okay, that's unusual. I would expect Pedro Severino to drop a fastball to hit him right in the middle. Why the hell's Adley dropping a ball? Well, it turns out because the ball went through his mitt and he had to get another one. And I was like, uh-oh.
What kind of catcher's mitt has a hole for it to go through?
I don't know, it just wore out and just...
Throw it hard enough,
yeah,
I guess.
it blew a hole in the pocket.
Did it blow a hole in his actual hand, too?
No,
like in the palm of his hand?
this part where he receives the ball. That's where the padding is. But yeah, Adley played well as well. He struck out twice, but he also got on base with 2 walks, and he threw out both base runners that tried to steal on him. Kid's got a hose, man. He's gonna be a force in major leagues when he gets there. And so the Bay Sox trailed 2-0 in the bottom of the 9th. Rutschman drew a walk to lead off the inning, and then this is where I think the Bay Sox sort of made a mistake. They pinch ran for him even though he wasn't the tying run. And
that doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, so they pinch ran for him, and so that means Rutschman's out of the game. The next hitter, Patrick Dorian, hits an Oppo Taco for a home run to tie it up, so having Rutschman on the base paths would have made no difference at all because you don't have to be a burner to trot around the base paths after a dude launches a home run. So then it goes to extra innings, and in the top of the 10th, the backup catcher flubs an easy play, and it allows the guy on second to advance to third. And then that guy ends up scoring on a sac fly. Rutschman almost certainly would have made that stop. And then in the bottom of the 10th, the Bay Sox had 2 runners on base, and Rutschman's spot in the lineup came up, but Rutschman was out of the game. So the backup catcher had to come up, and he feebly grounded out to end the game. The Bay Sox lost 3-2. So it was a fun experience. I was at the beach for a week, and all of this sunburn / color in my face came from Bay Sox Stadium. It was not. I did not get any of that at the beach. I just sat at the stadium and said no sunscreen and just got blasted by the sun the entire 3 hours I was there. I was also impressed with Grayson Rodriguez. He worked very fast, which I appreciated. Minor League Baseball has a pitch clock active in center field, and it's about 15 seconds. But
if only they would consider doing that for Major League Baseball.
You would hope, but Rodriguez wouldn't have any issue either way because he was throwing every pitch, at least from the windup, within 7 or 8 seconds. Like he was flying. Wow. And even when he was on he only pitched from the stretch to 1 or 2 batters because he walked 1 guy, and that was the only time he had runners on base. He still worked pretty fast from the stretch, so he was definitely impressive. My dad was like, "Why can't we call these guys up now?" I'm like, "Well, for one thing, yeah, they look impressive, but they still gotta learn how to be pros too. They gotta learn
looking impressive against other AA talent.
Sure, and there's something to be said about learning how to hit, learning how to pitch and stuff like that. And there's still development to be done with these young guys. Plus, the Orioles aren't ready to compete yet, so you might as well have people ready to go next year, the year after that, when you start to expect to see guys like Grayson Rodriguez, like Adley Rutschman at the show. So, but I highly recommend. We talked about it before, getting out to Prince George's Stadium for some Bay Sox games. They're a lot of fun. Tickets are cheap. I mean, I was sitting behind home plate. Tickets were $18. So it was pretty good.
Absolutely.
How much does it cost to sit behind home plate to watch your Yankees, Corey? You take out a mortgage or something.
Probably has to give up his firstborn son.
Yeah.
Probably.
So anyway, talk about your pinstriped whatevers.
They have a mascot. It's the Yankees. We just don't have like a physical mascot that we put.
They used to have one. His name was Dandy, and he was a fat guy with a big bat and a big red nose and a mustache.
Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Yes.
No, so the Yankees have figured out how to baseball again, at least for a short time period, because that's what we do. We figure out how to baseball, and we're like, oh, we might never lose another game, and then everything comes crashing down. So I'm still expecting that, but we have gone 5-1 since our last show, which is nice. That included a 3-game sweep of the Blue Jays, and I did predict a sweep in that series, but I predicted it the other way around. So a little bit surprising there. The Yankees recorded 2 triple plays this past week, bringing their total for the season to 3, which ties a Major League Baseball record. That included a first ever of its kind 1-3-6-2-5-6 triple play on Thursday against the Blue Jays. They then recorded a triple play to end the game on Sunday against the A's in a 2-1 ball game. And in Saturday's win against the A's, the Yankees won 7-5, and that included on the last pitch of the game, Aroldis Chapman striking out Matt Chapman with a 103.4 mile per hour fastball, which is the fastest pitch recorded so far this season. So a lot of fun stats for the Yankees this week. But I mean, the Yankees, we've done this before this season where we, pick up the pace, we win some games. We actually, with that sweep of the Blue Jays, we moved up out of 4th place and into 3rd place in the American League East. We've got a 2.5 game advantage over them. We've brought our run differential up to 0 on the season because we were well into the negative this time last week when we were recording. We're 5 games above 500. But yeah, I mean, we've done this before this season, and it's all unraveled very quickly. And so I totally expect that to happen. I mean, we've got what should be an easy 3-game series against the Royals starting tomorrow. So we're probably going to lose that series. And then we play Boston again, and they swept us last time. And that was at home. Now we have to go to Fenway. I'm fully expecting that this time next week we'll have done a complete 180, and I could be talking about how we've gone 1-5 since our last show.
How Aaron Boone needs to be fired because needs to tighten it up.
Tighten that up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not completely off of the Aaron Boone needs to be fired bus right now. If they fired him today, I would not complain.
Be a little awkward
What
to fire him
good would that do, though? Right?
Yeah, that's not gonna
firing
make
the
it better.
manager doesn't make people pitch better. That doesn't make Gary Sanchez not clank the ball back there. But it doesn't make Stanton and Judge healthy all the time.
No, but
Like what?
just
What?
It feels like the team doing something.
Something.
Yeah, you gotta do
That's
something,
basically
right?
what is firing a manager ever other than just making it feel like you're doing something?
Well, exactly.
We've talked about this before on the show. The manager in baseball is probably the least important position in all of sports.
Yeah, it's the lowest paid coach of any of the major 4 sports. Like, the manager doesn't make any money because,
He
firstly,
doesn't do anything.
especially at this point in, with the way Major League Baseball teams are run now, the front office is effectively the manager.
Yeah.
They kind of tell you what to do based off of, what the analytics
The
say.
manager can't do anything that's going to make a team's chances of winning increase. You can only do anything that would make it decrease.
One would think. I mean, there might be something to be said about losing the guys in the locker room, but that's always usually just an excuse for being bad.
Yeah.
So I've never seen a team. I've watched a lot of Mariners teams fire a lot of managers mid-season. It never made anything better. It just.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And like Tony La Russa's, we know he's not a good fit for that White Sox team. But that White Sox
Tony
team,
La
they're in
Russa's
first
not
place.
a good fit for sports.
For modern baseball, yeah.
Yeah. But they're in first place, so
They
nobody's complaining.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I also think, Corey, your boy Joe Torre is one of the most overrated characters in the history of baseball. Right? I could have managed those Yankees teams to at least one championship. I mean, let me bring in the Hall of Fame reliever right now in the critical situation. Like, really? That's just hard managing to do.
I mean, I'm not going to dispute that insofar as exactly what we just talked about. That, a manager their role is to not screw everything up. Right? So, I mean, you can say that about any manager in the history of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Any of them that are like highly touted, you can say they're overrated. So from that standpoint, yeah, Joe Torre is overrated because he's so highly regarded as a manager.
I'm gonna
like
push back a little bit on that.
I like him because he was the Yankees manager at that time. But I'm not going to sit here and say, those Yankees teams would have been so much worse with most other managers. Like, we might have been worse with some of them because some managers would have messed things up, more frequently than he may have. But I don't know the point that you're trying to make, Evan.
He's just basically saying that, the manager doesn't really matter. And
the manager doesn't do anything.
Now, historically speaking, like back in the day, the manager used to establish the team's overall strategy for how they were going to play. Like Earl Weaver definitely played a role in making the Orioles a really good team. They prioritized getting on base, they prioritized defense, they prioritized things that we talk about in modern day parlance in terms of Moneyball.
Does the manager not do that still today?
Nah, the front office has handled that. Like that's the priority, is the front offices handle the strategic side of it. They kind of set the lineup. They kind of establish pitching rotations and bullpen use and things like that. The manager's basically out there to push the buttons that somebody else tells him to do.
So it's not the manager who decides when to give the steal sign anymore.
Frankly, sometimes it might not be. Like there are times where the front office entirely dictates all of the in-game strategy, which I think is a little crazy because the manager should be doing something. But
why even bother paying for this position to exist?
It's a figurehead. I don't know. There's some value there.
Yeah, he makes like $800,000 a year, which is Ryan Flaherty money.
So we'll move to our last topic regarding baseball, which has been a topic we've discussed before. Miscellaneous goo, which is back in the news because pitchers are whining about not being allowed to use it.
Not being allowed to cheat anymore.
Particularly Corey's boy Garrett Cole, or should I say Kermit the Frog.
Well, there was Garrett Cole and that whole thing, but honestly, even worse than that was Tyler Glasnow.
I couldn't remember if we discussed Glasnow last week.
Well, no, because it happened after the fact when he blamed.
He blamed it for his UCL
I think that he may have made some comments before last week's show, but primarily we talked about Garrett Cole last week.
Sure.
Tyler Glasnow injured himself and then blamed it on Major League Baseball cracking down on something that's already been illegal. So he basically just admitted, I had to change my whole grip because I'm no longer allowed to use foreign. Well, buddy, you were not allowed to use foreign substances before this. Newsflash. You were already doing something illegal. It's just that now Major League Baseball said, we're actually going to enforce it now. Maybe Corey, you shouldn't have put yourself in a position where you needed to worry about whether they were enforcing it or not and just follow the damn rules.
Imagine if one of your students came to you saying that they failed their recent exam because they weren't allowed to cheat off of their classmate anymore.
And because I was actually walking around the room and looking over their shoulders and watching where their eyes were pointed. Oh, you don't usually do that. You usually sit behind your... Obviously, I don't sit behind my desk like goofing off and on my computer during a test. But if I had been, and all of a sudden I'm like, hey guys, just so you know, this time I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually look at you guys and make sure that your eyes are on your own paper. And then, a student says, oh, well, I wasn't prepared for that. I was going to cheat.
and also, you were wrong for not giving them a year, the rest of this year, to adjust to the anti-cheating protocols that you were establishing. My goodness. I couldn't believe it. It kind of reminded me a little bit just that part of like when I was in middle school and whenever we would do math homework reviews, the teacher would go around the room in order, sort of like Mrs. Yarish did in high school, where she'd ask you for the answer to problem 1, the next person behind you problem 2. And so, of course,
I never had yours.
I never had it from Mrs. Yarish because she didn't grade it or I didn't get in any trouble for not doing it, except maybe a little bit of a tongue lashing for about 5 seconds. But
every single day.
Yeah, in middle school, the rule was if you didn't do your homework, you got what was effectively a homework demerit. And if you got 5 of those, you had to serve a detention. And so, naturally, being me, I would be like, okay, I'm 13th in line, so I'm going to do problem 13, and I'll probably do the previous 5 in case the people in front of me get them wrong and they go to the next person. So that way I'll have 8 through 13 done, and I only had to do 5 out of 30 problems. It was great. But I also knew full well that what I was doing was wrong, and I knew full well that she could very well say, okay, we're going to randomly go around the room.
Yeah, she could call an audible.
Yeah, and eventually she did, and I was like... And I didn't sit there and say, well, you didn't give me a chance to adjust by doing my homework like I was supposed to. I just said, yep, you got me.
Right.
You got me. I knew this was a possibility. I knew that eventually you were going to maybe call an audible. I knew this was on the table, and I got to take the L. That's just the way it is. And the thing is, that's what also pisses me off about this is because it's not like they were blindsided by this. We heard this conversation during spring training. We knew coming into this year that baseball was going to look at this in some capacity. We didn't know to the extent, we didn't know exactly what they were going to do, but we knew that baseball had their eye on it, which means the pitchers knew as well. They should have been like, okay, they're probably eventually going to do something that could get me in trouble if they catch me. Maybe I should, figure out how to not cheat.
Yeah, and if you decide to take the risk, you got to live with that decision. Yeah. You can't say, "Oh, the MLB, this is all their fault." This is still your fault.
This is nonsense. I mean, for Pete's sake, or whatever Garrett Cole said, it sounded ridiculous. and because we talked about this last week, like Evan asked me straight up, like, did I ever use substances on the mound? And I said no. I should have elaborated further. It never even crossed my mind to do it. Like I never.
You didn't think about putting some honey or some molasses or chocolate syrup on the ball?
My whole life, I've used these two fingers and this thumb to throw the ball. Why the hell would I go out there and be like, let me try something new and just throw some crap on my hand and see if it works better? I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to pitch with what I got, because I feel like at the high school level, if I got caught doing that, my ass would get kicked off the team. Like they wouldn't just say, okay, take a seat. I understand that when you get to the pro level and big amounts of money is being exchanged, sometimes your integrity can go with it. I get that. It's obviously the case. We've seen it with steroids and other means of cheating.
But you don't want to rely on that and risk, even if you did make it through high school and make it through college and make it to the big leagues, you don't want to rely on it to the point that if they do crack down on it, that all of a sudden your career goes to the wayside over it. I don't drink coffee because I don't want to get to a point where I rely on it to be able to be functional in the morning. Sure. And that's way lower stakes than pitching in the Major League Baseball.
And cheating. I mean, that's the thing is, eventually at some point, regardless of whatever habits you got into, regardless of how much money it may have made you, it doesn't matter. At some point, it gets back to what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. You know this is wrong. You decided to do it anyway. I'm not going to kill you for it. I get why you did it. But at some point, you have to just say, okay, I know what I was doing was wrong. I did it because it secured my financial success in Major League Baseball. And these are the repercussions for it. Be a man and take it, man. Like, if you're going to sit there and cheat, accept the consequences when you get caught. I mean, I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, kick you out of the league forever because you're a cheater. But I'm going to say, hey, they've got rules against this, and for a good reason now, because you are hurting the product by being too artificially good at your job to the point where baseball is becoming unwatchable. Accept the reality of the situation. You're not going to be allowed to put goo on your fingers to up your spin rates. And I don't care if you have to grip the little ball a little harder to get as much break, and you're worried, oh, if I grip the ball harder, I might tear my UCL. Okay. Well, how has every pitcher ever pitched until we decided to start using spider tack? They use their two fingers and their thumb. I mean, come on. This isn't hard.
Yeah. I mean, Glasnow needs to be suspended. I understand. Also, why is it a 10-game suspension with pay? What exactly is a suspension with pay other than a vacation? It's the same thing.
It's 2 weeks off, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine getting called in my boss's office. Like, what if that happened? And it's like, yeah, we're suspending you with pay, and you're banished to Orlando, Florida for 2 weeks. I'm sorry. That's called vacation, not suspension.
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah. I'll jump all over that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Encourages me to use even more spider tack. Just get some time off.
Use the whole tub of it. Slather it on there. Like Fred Bolitnikoff and the stick-up. He's just covered in it.
I didn't expect a Bolitnikoff reference when discussing baseball, but that's where we go sometimes.
Yeah. So, was he not covered in the miscellaneous goo?
Oh, he absolutely was.
And it's illegal now.
Yeah, probably because of him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all we've got for topics. Do you guys have any other late additions or shout-outs or anything that you want to get to before we get rolling?
Shout out to all three of our fathers for Father's Day yesterday.
Yes, indeed.
Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. That's all I've got, I think.
Evan?
No, I don't have anything. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think I've covered everything at this point, so I'm going to sing us home here. You can email us at thesportsballers@gmail.com to provide any type of feedback or mailbag questions like Rashonda did today. We appreciate all of those from anybody out there listening. You can also find us on all of the major podcast networks, if you will. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, you name it, we're probably there. And you can follow us on Twitter as well, at SportsBallers18. You can also follow us individually. Corey is at Corey Puffett. I am at Quagmire67. And Evan is at Evan_Ash13. This was episode 149 of the Sports Ballers podcast. We are coming up on damn near season 4, probably sometime later this summer.
Yeah.
I think we started. Away. Yeah, sometime in early August, probably.
Late July, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll be heading into season 4 soon enough. It's hard to believe time has been. I don't want to say flying because the pandemic has sucked, but the last couple of months it certainly feels like it has been. So, thank you guys for tuning in. We do this once a week. We are on Mondays, as we've said, for probably the duration of the summer until football season. And we will see you guys next week when Evan's got the con. So take it easy.